I'm Catherine Bennett, and welcome to the Cyber Chat Studio. Every episode excites me in some shape or form, but in this particular episode, I am super excited. My guest today is Chris Hodson, Chief Security Officer at CyberHaven, and he brings with him so much experience, fascinating topics, so much information and insights that I think you're going to really enjoy it. So just to kind of big him up a little bit here, over to Chris just to quickly introduce himself, and then we're going to ask him a couple of quick questions.
Cheers, Kathy. We've done a great job of introducing me, so not much to say. But yeah, Chris Hodson, been in the industry, 22 years now, like everything from kind of solutions engineering, architecture, running security functions and stuff. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation today.
So I'm hoping I'm going to learn an awful lot today, and if not, well, I'm sure I've learned a lot in the past. But before we go into obviously more of the kind of the serious topics, I'm really keen, as I'm sure that the kind of the viewers and listeners are. I want to ask a couple of questions to you. So my first one is, what is your favourite place in the world and why?
I would say, well, I travel a ton, right? So like lots of people have these far off destinations and say, oh, Barbados or something, but probably somewhere like Devon, like in all seriousness, like somewhere I don't have to try and get 3 children and a dog, like, do you know what I mean? Like stuff. And there's just a very sedate kind of relaxing pace of life there. So whenever we can, kind of going down there and just having a few days of like the seaside and just quiet and no airports as well. 3 children under 10 going to an airport is never fun. Probably not the most like exciting answer, but probably the most authentic, I'd say.
No, do you know what? I think I'm kind of with you on that. The last couple of years, especially obviously during lockdown when we weren't supposed to travel, a lot of people obviously went down south, and the weather, when you've got it is beautiful down there. It's just, I think sometimes the wind and the rain spoil it a little bit.
Yeah,
but
not much fun in November, December, but yeah, quite a lot of fun in maybe July.
No, I actually love that answer. And my second question, favourite film or series, because I know obviously series are becoming an awful lot more popular than films at the moment. So
yeah. I would have said, until I went, spoiler alert, but like Top Boy on Netflix has been brilliant up until the final episode, which unfortunately I watched the other day and was pretty dismal. But I'm terrible with films. My wife will tell you this. Like I just generally watch the same things. Like again, I fly a lot, right? So I sit on airplanes and I'll generally watch like the films I've already seen. So like massively love kind of the Bourne Ultimatum, the Bourne series, like the Ocean series, the old kind of gangster films as well, or like anything Scorsese, I would say as well. So like traditional stuff. But no, I don't sit and binge watch stuff. Like I not much, no.
Oh, I have to. Once I've got into a really good series, it's sort of 2:00 and I'm thinking, maybe just one more. Just
one more.
See if I can cram in as much as I can before the next one. No, love, again, pretty good answer there. And I suppose getting more into the cybersecurity space.
Yeah.
How did you start your journey? We're going to kind of go on to your role in a minute, and obviously the company, but it's really interesting to find out how people got into the business. Was it something that you've always really enjoyed, or did you kind of just grow into the role? Really,
a bit of all of that. Should we just say that? No, genuinely a bit of all of that. So like I've always been into technology and kind of the intricacies of how things work and like how you can break them, I suppose, fundamentally. So that kind of is a fairly solid grounding in any form of security, right? But kind of got into technology through kind of software development and support roles. So a Visual Basic, show my age now, Visual Basic 6 and kind of software development principles at college, and we're into like more kind of IT support and solutions engineering type roles. Mm-hmm. And I went through, I think it was about 2000. I did like my MCSE, so Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer work. And at the end of that, you get a series of electives. You can go into like databases or messaging, security. Sadly, I actually did all 3, but like really enjoyed the security side of things much more. Like designing security architectures, understanding like principal of least privilege, understanding how to build things to reduce an attack surface and stuff. So I'd say, as I said, it's a bit of all of them. Like I kind of was guided down that path through other kind of IT stuff that I'd done, but yeah, never looked back really. Went from there, then went into some kind of consultancy roles down in London, and then more kind of full-time work running security functions and things. So
Amazing. So kind of from a young age, I know some people sort of say, well, I fell into it and it was something that I actually found really, really interesting. But other people, from a very, very young age, like computers and programming and like you say, how to kind of fix broken things. So it's
No.
interesting with people's backgrounds, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
We had an Amstrad CP. I remember vividly. We had this Amstrad CPC 464 when I was a kid. Which, yeah, started looking at that and how kind of those really old kind of cassettes for games and stuff, and building out how they work. So
yeah.
it's a super nerdy answer, right? But yeah, that's how it all came about.
Oh gosh, I think I remember it must have been, I can't remember how old I was, but I remember the most excited I ever was because my dad bought me a Commodore 64 and all the little
Yeah,
kind of discs that went in and
showing our age, Kathy,
yeah.
definitely. That was like an evolution, or like the next iteration, I should say, from yeah, the Amstrad, I think. But yeah,
Well,
around the same.
I still think it was one of the best computers ever invented. The PlayStation 3s, 4s, whatever version we're on now, just doesn't cut it. I think that was the best one ever.
Agreed.
Definitely showed my age there.
Yeah.
So a little bit on to yourself now. So explain to me about your current role and a little bit about CyberHaven, because I'd love to hear all the new tech that they do and where you sit within the organisation.
Cool. I generally go awfully into like pitch mode. It's really difficult to talk about company you work
Go
for.
for
So pretty
it.
much everything security at the company kind of falls under the organisation which I run, which is quite cool. So I suppose for the last kind of 10 years that's been the case, right? Going into organisations and sort of building a security organisation. Like less so maybe at Zscaler because there was an established function and it was more a case of where I could add value. But certainly when I think about Contentful, when I think about like the latter stages of Tanium, which is obviously where we know each other, and then now it's about going in and establishing kind of I suppose a security program. Like what does that organisation need to kind of identify and reduce risk, not only for what they want to do, but also kind of like the expectations of their customers as well. So take CyberHaven, we're 120 users, but we have like some of the world's largest organizations and customers and whatnot, and they expect our
Yeah.
security to be kind of commensurate with their security. So everything from kind of cloud security engineering through to
Mhm.
GRC to product development, like various different areas that my function feeds into, IT security as well, so all the corporate side of things. So yeah, I mean, people call it like a full spectrum, quote unquote, like CSO position, but that's pretty much it. In terms of what we do, and I'm trying not to say paradigm now, but really it's data protection. And by that, I don't mean DLP. I mean like identifying the information you have, where it is, where it's going, who has access to it, and
Yeah.
really trying to give incident responders and analysts like a faster time to respond, like high fidelity information. We've all seen the cases of IP theft at the moment from like
Mhm.
large organizations around the world. It's super difficult to identify how that happens if you're using kind of traditional tooling and whatnot. So yeah, data detection and response is kind of like a phrase. It's a category really that I believe we're defining and stuff. I've known the CEO for a long time, which is primarily why I'm there. It was initially anyway. And yeah, it's a ton of fun.
Amazing. And it shows something, I think, if you have, say, 120 users, but obviously you deal with some of the biggest clients out there because, they're actually investing in the technology and they're seeing that obviously you're growing and where you've kind of leapt into the
Yeah.
market and so on. So that's a huge thing. So we've got a couple of really interesting topics that we are specifically going to go through and that I kind of want to educate everybody. But I wanted to throw into the mix a few little questions that perhaps maybe people didn't know about yourself. So obviously you've had a very interesting past, but what is an interesting fact that perhaps maybe people wouldn't necessarily know about you?
So the thing is, without sounding like an idiot, I've been asked that question so many times that like, I've run out of things to say. I played ice hockey until I was like 21, which ain't like my North
Yeah.
American colleagues and stuff find that quite interesting as they just assume we don't have any ice rinks or certainly any hockey teams over here. And very slowly learning to play the piano at the moment. But that's more like my children doing it and they get involved. But they're like really boring. I'm supposed to say, hey, I go like hang gliding at the weekend or
Scuba
something.
diving or no.
Yeah.
Do you know
No,
what?
I'm
I
not
don't think
super
you have
bored.
time a lot, especially with three small children and work commitments. I think a lot of it is I don't have the time, or I'm busy driving one here, there, and everywhere. But Interestingly enough, I know that you have had quite a bit of time to do a little bit of writing. So I'd like to be interested in hearing about, what you've written recently, and what it's about, really.
Yeah. So when was it initially? Back in 2018, I was doing quite a lot of writing. I'm going to date myself. I think it was at Tanium, and that's right. It was when I was leaving Zscaler and joining Tanium. I've done a lot of blogging, a lot of just general writing in the industry. And so Kogan Page, who are a large publishing house, came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to write a book on cybersecurity?" And I was kind of like, "Well, I'm not sure. That's a ton of effort and whatnot." I kind of got like artistic license to write about whatever I wanted to write about, which was quite cool. So I decided to write something on risk management and kind of the misappropriation of terms that we have in our industry for what is a threat, what is a vulnerability, how do you like qualify business impact and whatnot. So I wrote a book called Cyber Risk Management, aptly titled. It did all right, apparently, and they came back to me and said, "Hey, do you want to do a second edition?" And this was, what was this, end of last year? I'm trying to think now. Yeah, I think it's roughly the end of last year. So I said, okay. But yeah, I was onboarding with CyberHaven at the time, which I really didn't anticipate how much work like updating a book would be. I assumed, oh, it's fine, you've written most of it.
Yeah.
Just need to add some bits and bobs here and there. But no, it was, I've just finished it. So much has happened since the first edition. Thank you, in 2018. So lots of content around everything from like Kubernetes orchestration to large language models to, some of the changes in policy and legislation at a government level in the US and things. Like, I've tried to keep it as broad and interesting as possible, but yeah, I'm delighted that it's finished. I didn't have,
You feel like, it's finished. It's on to go continue.
It certainly might be a version 3, Kathy, I can tell you. But yeah, various other things I'm interested in writing about, but yeah, not another book on cyber risk management.
And
Shameless, I think it comes out at the end of the year. I need to check with them, but yeah.
Fantastic. And do you know what it does? I mean, I know, obviously from a little bit of writing that I've done as well, it does take an awful lot of time. You think it's a case of sort of putting down a few words and kind of making sure they make sense. But a lot of the time it's going back and then changing things. And I'm constantly rereading and then rechecking bits and pieces. So to have done obviously the 2 versions, I think is amazing. Love to find out obviously where we can get version 1 and version 2 when it comes out later this year. So I'll make sure that obviously we put a link to that where everybody can find it. But amazing accomplishment. So I guess one more quick question before we go into the actual tech here. Where do you see yourself in sort of 5 to 10 years? What's your kind of ultimate sort of goal, really, if you have one?
That's a great question. I don't think I'll be running a security organization. Like, I've done that. Like, spoiler for anyone at CyberHaven. No, I've done it for so long, and I really enjoy the industry, but like, I'm spending much more time now with other organizations. Like, if it's advising startups, if it's like board advisory work, if it's helping our like VCs and whatnot on kind of investments and things. So I think it'll probably be something in that. So it would definitely still be in the industry, but if it's that, or it's like helping people new to cyber, like education and awareness and stuff. So I think that's probably a very honest appraisal of where I'll be. I think doing that. I can't see myself going back into end user world and running another security organization.
Do you know what? I think the experience counts for an awful lot. People walk into the industry and there's so much to learn, and there's so much that you kind of do learn from your journey that perhaps maybe you didn't realize. So I think there's so many organizations, whether it's startup, whether it's kind of people that are new to it, business development guys, I think they all could learn a huge amount from people who've been in it for quite a while. So good luck with that. I hope that goes in the right
way. Now, if anyone from my work is this is not like this isn't me handing in my notice. Like, this is like you said 5 to 10 years, didn't you? So
yeah, absolutely. More on the 10. So we've got so many different topics that obviously I really, really wanted to go through. But I think that the one that I'd really like to learn about, and I know you're obviously very experienced in this area, is cloud native security engineering. So I'd love you to tell me, in layman's terms, what is it? Why is it important? And I guess a bit of insight from your side, really.
Yeah, no problem at all, Kathy. I'm thinking of the best way of doing this, because it's a like quite an esoteric, I suppose, technologically oriented subject. just think about the construction of a company today, right? And think about how that differs from maybe 15, 20 years ago. So we used to have companies where like the internet and technology more broadly was like almost a nice to have, right? A few people would have internet access in an organization, but they certainly wouldn't be using it as like a front of house way of selling business. There wouldn't be an e-commerce brand. There wouldn't be mobile applications. And it's very different today. Like I've heard in hundreds of places, every organization is a technology organization. So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if they're like a car firm or they're in confectionery or other areas of retail or manufacturing. Technology is at the forefront of everything they're doing. So in those scenarios, like it's really important that that technology is highly available, that it's performant, that it's secure. And this is like the longest intro ever, but I hope it's useful. And like
No, I'm learning.
in those situations, it's really important that you can deliver things quickly and in a repeatable fashion. So for me, cloud native security is really just making sure that we as a security organization can deliver services to like our business stakeholders, so engineers, SREs, developers, in a
Yeah.
way that suits them. So generally, without alienating or upsetting anyone, that means very quickly and without the need for tons of documentation. So
Yeah.
security teams have shifted from this view. So when I was working as a security architect, we'd have the luxury of like 2 or 3 weeks to write a security design. And that design would cover everything from like high level requirements, mid-level design, low level like implementation guide. We don't get that now. The security team needs to have their controls like automated into kind of CI/CD pipelines. We need to kind of foster this culture of like awareness and education amongst developers and stuff. So that's broadly what it is. Some of it's technology, but a lot of it's kind of process and like, yeah, I call it in our organization, like trying to get engineers to work in a semi-autonomous fashion, which
Yeah.
encapsulates a lot of it, I think.
Interesting. So I do a little bit of research on every episode, and when obviously the topic of cloud native security engineering came along, it wasn't something that obviously I'd been familiar with, or the terms, should I say. And in a lot of different articles and websites, etc., the same thing kept cropping up, and that was obviously the 4 integrated layers of cloud clusters, containers, and code. So just a little bit about that. Is that something that is relevant to cloud native security engineering? What does it kind of mean? But if you could explain that part for me.
Wow, I can. That's like another. You could have like another podcast on this. So, like when you have the 4 Cs, that's generally something that the organizations using Kubernetes would have,
Right.
because it's the way that you would orchestrate these applications. And we could spend a lot of time talking about like how microservices are constructed and how they communicate. But like broadly, this is my opinion now, like just my opinion. Like broadly, we used to have infrastructure and application security, right? And they were
Yeah.
like 2 very distinct pillars, 2 domains. You have people who did one or the other. But in like this cloud native world where you have DevOps, so you essentially have one team who are then coding and then they're deploying infrastructure and they're running applications, and they might be doing this multiple times a day. They might be doing this every time someone like commits a new piece of code, they're creating a new environment. So in that world, it's no longer good to say, it's no longer appropriate, rather, I should say, to go, right, okay, you're either an infrastructure person or you're an application person. You need people who are cross-functional. So having the
Yeah.
4 Cs, having people look at code clusters, kind of cloud and containers, is a much better way. It's a much better kind of set of abstraction layers to build things out. That's like the worst explanation of the 4 Cs, but broadly,
No,
that's
like
how
that.
we, and then we measure our maturity against those four layers.
Brilliant. No, that's good. And you're probably going to say no here, but it reminds me slightly of a lot of the project management methodologies. So things like Scrum and Agile, where you have a lot of people that are doing either projects or, programming, and they're doing everything at the kind of the same time, but ultimately working towards the same goal. You're probably going to say, no, it's absolutely nothing like it.
No, that's exactly it. And if you think about the methodologies, kind of like the frameworks that teams use to deliver these kind of cloud native technologies, they are generally using some form of agile based way of doing things, because you need to prototype, you need to test, and there are things that are not going to work, and the quicker that you can find out about those, the better. Or your customer requirements may change. Like if you're following a waterfall based model these days for software development, like in most cases that's going to be like insufficient, I would say.
Brilliant. No, that's been really, really useful, really informative. So I guess, can you give, because obviously CyberHaven is quite new to myself. I know a lot of people out there obviously know who you are and what you do, but you're obviously market leaders in that space. Can you describe, how you've sort of helped end users address their needs and challenges, and obviously why you are market leaders at the moment?
Yeah, another good question. I think it's because DLP is broken, right? If you think about, and I won't mention the organizations necessarily, but I spent a long time in financial services, and there were always compliance requirements for DLP solutions. Like you had to have something for PCI or for, some local law or regulation. And it didn't really work because it was predicated on like knowing what you were looking for and having a content signature for a particular file. So what we do is we care much more about the context rather than the content of data. So where is it coming from? Who has access to it? Where's it going? What did they do with it and when? And when you start to build out those profiles, you can get much more flexible, much more granular in terms of like identifying things that should be happening or shouldn't be happening. So when we talk about what we do, like we can take an organization where DLP was like, almost like a naughty 3-letter acronym and turn it into something that does identify risks in the environment, does allow kind of various people, the privacy officer, the CISO, the CFO, the head of HR, to know how information is being used in their environment. And that helps kind of shape behaviors. It helps shape behaviors. It helps with your regulatory compliance. It helps organizations better understand risks as they stand. So yeah, shifting away from it being a very preventative model to one that's much more about kind of detection and response, which, you think of other areas of our industry, the anti-malware kind of side of things went through that probably 10 years ago. We shifted from like AV, which was just a series of signatures to block stuff, through to the identification that, if people are motivated enough, they're going to do that thing anyway. So identifying it quickly and then responding is much more important, which we can do with our platform. So yeah, it's a really fun industry to be in. Like genuinely, I got very early stage Zscaler vibes when I joined. Like when I joined Zscaler, we were doing things very differently to like traditional kind of proxy solutions, and that's kind of what I get at CyberHaven. We're approaching data protection from a different vantage point.
Brilliant. And I guess the way that things are going at the moment, AI, machine learning, all these kind of new technologies are all the buzzword. So, I guess with people in so many different places doing so many different things, multiple applications, multiple devices, technology like that is really important. And like you say, it's doing something preventative rather than something before it's too late. So really interesting. So again, what I'll do is I'll put some links below for anybody that wants to look at CyberHaven and all the different areas. But one of the things, obviously, you mentioned around like the C-suite of employees, and also how important it is to a business. And one of the things that I really, really wanted to ask you was about, engagement with the board and executive teams, because I think sometimes being on the other side of the fence in sales or channel, or, working with a lot of different partners, they have their own perception on how they think that they should engage with CISO and CTO teams and obviously the rest of the board. What kind of advice, experience, knowledge can you give us around kind of engagement of the C-level suite of staff, really?
Cool. Good question. And this is just
it could be an episode on their own, but yeah,
no. This is good. This is good. Definitely. I know this is going to sound trite, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but it is about tying things back to business outcomes, right? Like going into, especially a board or an audit committee, and talking about solutions that did stuff they were supposed to do, like, hey, my malware scanner blocked 200 million things this month, or my proxy server did XYZ. Great. Well, you've paid millions of dollars for that. That's expected. Don't come and talk about that. Talk about various things. Talk about things that could have an existential impact on your company. That's the way that I look at it. So, if a particular ransomware, look what's happening with the casinos over in the US at the moment, losing millions of dollars a day due to a ransomware incident or a spate of them across different casinos. Now, the person going into the audit committee, and I don't know the people, the caveat, like huge caveat, but going in and talking, in a very nondescript way about ransomware attacks, is probably not something that's going to garner a lot of interest from a board. But talking about the potential system downtime that your business could have, and if you can quantify that in terms of revenue, that's pretty powerful. Something the boards always ask as well is around, could this happen to us? That's something that I've been asked. In fact, I was talking to someone yesterday on this very subject, like understanding, are we protected? And that opens a philosophical conversation about protected from who and profiling your environment. But board engagement, in my experience, is something that has to be done like regularly, like as regularly as you can get in there, like painting a story. You talk about sales. A lot of it is about sales. It's selling the importance of security and having it as a functional and a non-functional differentiator in your business. Well, it depends what your business does, but that's what I would say. Go and be clear as well. Talk about business outcomes. Talk about and also try and think about enablement as well. Like all too often, CSOs go in there and say, the world's caving in, this is what's happening, there's all these adversaries doing really crazy shit. Like if you can go in and talk about how security can help your business, if it's building customer confidence, assurance, like the opinion of quality and integrity, like building out that messaging, I think is important as well. I don't know if that answers your question. That's just like literally how I engage with boards.
No, absolutely. And do you know what I think? And this is, we've got an episode coming up shortly, which I think you'll find really, really fascinating. And it's about how salespeople should engage more with CISOs and CTOs. It's very one-sided in terms of obviously the salesperson wanting to talk about technology all the time. And a lot of times, I think salespeople tend to bombard people with, we're the greatest tech in the world. This is why you should talk to us. This is our messaging. This is where we're the best thing since sliced bread. And a lot of the time, they're actually not looking at what is important to the board and what is important to the business. Some organizations might be going through sustainability, or they might be looking at certain things that they need to implement for the others. So it doesn't matter whether your technology is the best thing ever. You're going to have to then look at what's important to them. What are they trying to achieve? Where do they want to go with it? And when is the right time? Because I always take it back to the analogy of a car for some reason, but I could have a Ferrari and I could give it to you for free. But actually, if you've got a family of 5, are you really going to want a Ferrari? You probably would. I know I would. But do you know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean. That's a good analogy. Yeah, I think sometimes this is like, I'm not going to now get on a soapbox about this, but security folk, especially those running functions, they have a lot on their plate, right? Like it's not just, if you're engaging with a particular vendor about a solution, like invariably that is part of a security architecture. That's part of a series of things, another trite comment, but across people, process and technology. So of course the salesperson is almost myopically focused on their deal and engagement with that CSO, but they've got a ton of other stuff to think about. So the better you can get to know that CSO and their organization, understand the market they're operating in, like the regulatory considerations, the other stuff they have on their plate, I think that will make more effective and efficient salespeople, definitely. And fewer messages on LinkedIn from CSOs about salespeople. Like broadly,
Stop emailing me, ranting. But no, I mean, it is good. I think it's always good the perspective of somebody who understands that process and obviously totally gets it. So thank you so much. That has been a really, really insightful half an hour. Love talking to you. Obviously, I learned so much before when we worked together. So thank you for joining me. I hope you will be on another episode soon. And hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. And goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.